Well, I want to talk about training, really, because that's what I do. I've spent the last 8 years of my life pretty much working on changing the way news is gathered and distributed. I'm not alone in this. I'm one of about 50 people who has helped make this change. That means that newspaper publishers, if they could put out fatwas, they'd put one out on me. I do regularly get email from people in the newspaper business telling me that I have been instrumental in destroying their profession. Oh well, I go up now and then to places like the Columbia University School of Journalism and explain to them how they can do this and ride the change and how they can do it and how no, citizen journalism won't take over, that it is a valuable component that they should subsume and absorb just the way mainstream American recording industry has grabbed and mainstreamed rap music. I do not know whether or not you like rap music. That is up to you. But it has certainly been grabbed and assimilated by the mainstream music industry. This is the history of America. We take underground movements and splinter groups and we make them into fads, and then we make TV shows out of them. So I do expect one day that there will be, no, not Fraser's idea of making user-friendly into a sitcom, but he really did want to do that at one point. But sooner or later, we will see, the television drama based around a company called, I don't know, Dovell. And it will be started by some crazy man, an old man in some state, I'll call it maybe Utah, and it'll be called the Parachute Group, and there will be weird things, and there'll even be a former scientist from then who tries to make an operating system for the Cherokee Nation. Anybody know this story? How many people in this room have heard of Jeff Murky? Well, he's an extremely amusing person. He hasn't threatened to sue me for a good month. But he does fairly regularly. And he hates Linux because it's not free and because of that, what do they call it, that GPL thing, which as we all know is communism or something. Anyway, so GNU Linux and GNU Linux and all that is here to stay. It's growing. It's going to happen. And let's go out to the edge, because this goes back to the essence of citizen journalism and all that stuff. I wrote last week a piece that I was just letting meld, because it's not time sensitive. That'll run on Slashdot probably next week, about the Web 2.0 social internet things. Right now we talk about the social internet a lot, right? And we all have, everybody here has a Flickr account, right? Do you have a Flickr account? Do you have a Flickr account? Okay, do you have a Flickr account? Do you have one? Okay, so Flickr has penetrated this small group. How many people in Honolulu would you guess have Flickr accounts? 100? 2,000? Okay. All over San Francisco, there are signs. You would think Flickr is world-beating if you're in San Francisco. Newsflash, I do not live in San Francisco. I live in Bradenton, Florida, in Manatee County, where 30% of the residences are house trailers, and where Tropicana orange juice comes from. It's headquartered very near my house. It is also, Manatee County is the center of all cut flower growing for the east coast of the United States, and most of the winter vegetables and salad stuff. That strip of Florida. That's what we really do, aside from having the Richies condomizing the coast. And nobody there knows what a Flickr is. How many people here have heard of FreeCycle? Okay, FreeCycle is not big amongst the technological sophisticates. It's like a swap meet group. The average user of FreeCycle in my neck of the woods is about 58 years old and female. And yet, I've never read an article about FreeCycle in any of the hotshot online news media. I learned about it from my local newspaper. It is the only thing on the internet that I learned about from a newspaper first. So it's not being used by the cool internet kids. And it's a series of Google group or Yahoo groups actually, where you can just post items that you have and you want to give away or that you need something. There are over 800 members of Free Cycle in Bradenton, Florida. There are several thousand members in Sarasota, Florida. And Bradenton and Manatee County are so bad that the Economic Development Council's website, and this is in a town that says they want to lure tech business, can only be seen with Internet Explorer. This is not a technologically hip area. But Free Cycle is big because all you need is an internet connection and to be able to join a Yahoo group. The moderators need no technical skills, and the average moderator is, like 150 years old and retired. There's also in my area, there's Tampa Blab, which you've never heard of. It's a little local blog aggregator with a discussion group. So you can hear what other people, see what other people in your area are writing about. Your area, if you happen to live within 50 miles of Tampa, Florida. How many people here live within 50 miles of Tampa, Florida? So it's totally irrelevant for you. Does anybody here live in Oregon? Well, there's one called Orblog, and that's where the guy who's doing it in Tampa got the idea. It's intensely local. This is the sort of thing that anybody who can figure out WordPress can use. So you need somebody who can, handle just the tiniest bit of PHP to set it up. Except the guys who are already doing it will show you anyway. And then you add a picture for your town and a different domain name. You would have Hanublab. You can do this. And you'll have, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 page views a day. Won't be a big thing, but you'll find out all the local blogs, political, social, sexual, whatever. There are crazy people around Tampa. There are crazy people here too. Now, Tampa Blab is not venture capital finance. Nobody was there at Web 2.0. There's no hotshot stuff going with it. And yet, it is successful at being what it is. This is the new face of a lot of things. And also in the Tampa area, which I'll talk about because I live there, we have something called a Linux users group. You may remember these. The Linux users group there is primarily a professional organization where people who are small consultants and small business IT guys help each other move Linux and open source applications into their employers' and clients' places. They are not noticed by Gartner. They are noticed by Dan Kuznetsky at IDC. Why? Because he lives in Osprey, Florida, just on the other side of Sarasota. So he knows about this because he's on the email list. There's a group like that almost everywhere. And it's happening at the edges, at the very edges, and moving in. Whether Novell wants to jump in that, or Red Hat, or Green Hat, or Windspire, or Lindros, or whomever, is okay. And it's okay if they don't. These are the people I say, hey, I put up Open Exchange, and I put it on my server, and you guys can all play with it, and it's been working out, and I am cool with this. I like this. People try it, and then they ask questions, and then they go try it, and that leads us to Matt Moen. How many of you know who Matt Moen is? Probably about, you know who Matt Moen is. Just because I introduced him to you probably at Linux World. Matt Moen is a friend and lives about 2 miles from me. He's a nice 27-year-old Slashdot reader who owns a turbocharged Subaru, and he has short hair. His IM nickname is Clean Cut, because he is a good Christian, goes to a basic church and all that, and lives with his parents because they have a huge house with a separate apartment. He is a very, very fine programmer. He has a computer science degree from State University of New York. He did a lot of the work to upgrade the Nielsen, as in the TV rating people's data gathering stuff, and that's pretty heavy scale. And they're running it mostly at his instigation. It's a Perl project with MySQL behind it. Their new augmented and more accurate rating system. He did a lot of work on that as a contractor. Then he wasn't working, and then he worked at Home Depot for a while. It was good exercise and close to home. And then a neighbor, one of his father's buddies, came over and said, "Hey, Matt, you know about that Unix stuff, right?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, there's this guy I know, Eldon, and he's got a fish farm. And he needs to hire a guy who knows that Unix and maybe that Linux thing that he heard about someplace on an IBM ad." So Matt says, "Fish farm?" He said, "Yeah, Eldon got a nice fish farm up toward Gibsonton." So Matt went up and talked to Eldon Segrest. And we found out that this idea of the fish farm, you know, you're thinking of what? Some guy, you know, doing some tilapia and some ponds. Segrest Farms, okay, Eldon is a little bit of a country boy with a gray beard, followed by one of his 2 or 3 beagle hunting dogs at all times. He does have his hunting dogs follow him around. He is a Florida cracker. He's also an ex-school, high school science teacher and very smart man. You know, one of those southern, country boys. He said, "Well, I don't know," but, and then he can discourse intelligently on many topics, and he knows what he's talking about. And Segrest Farms isn't a couple of tilapia ponds. It is the sole supplier of all tropical fish and live aquarium supplies for Walmart and Petland and Petco. And he dominates the entire U.S., maybe not here in Hawaii, although I suspect, but the continental U.S. supply of aquarium fish. He ain't cheese. He's a wholesaler, and he's not poor. And Matt walked in and didn't find, 2 old, beiged out from cigarette smoke desktops and a lot of paper. No, he walked in and found a not bad Citrix and client-server network already running. And he found that Eldon was very smart, and that Eldon's CFO was very smart too. And basically they came to a trial thing, and he worked there for a month as a contractor, and Eldon called him in and said, "All right, I'm going to pay you a number here." It was not a small figure. He said, "However, you are going to have complete control of the computers and the website, and I'm paying you a lot of money, so I'm not going to tell you anything what to do. I'm hiring you because you're smart. You're supposed to tell me." And they turned Matt loose. Last week was the day when the Exchange server went away. He took them, and this is a year and some odd later. They do not have an Exchange server. They have an open Exchange server. And they have, I think he said he had 2 complaints from 2 people who had problems with it. He has them using webmail because it's easier. They still have Windows desktops, pretty much, but they're going away because they do a lot of phone order work, and upon reflection, Eldon cannot see why you have to pay for a Windows license for these single application screens. And he agrees that it's okay to put the KDE desktops in or whatever so that they can have some games to play in between. He's not a slave driver, and he thinks that his employees in between calls should be able to have a little good time there, surf the internet. And Eldon went with Matt up to Largo, Florida. How many of you know where Largo, Florida is? It's not Key Largo. Largo, Florida is famous for several things. First of all, it's the next town over to St. Petersburg, which we all know is famous because that's where Wikipedia is. The evil Wikipedia. It's in our part of Florida too. It's also where old Paul, a man who made the first website outside of Switzerland, the original Stanford Linear Accelerator Project site, is living nowadays and flying back to Stanford once in a while. So we're becoming quite the tech center, just like you will any time, any decade or century now. So it can be done. And we still have, in our county, the economic development website can only be viewed with Explorer. I've linked to it about 50 times on Slashdot. They're finally changing it. I've done this to pull their chain because I'm an evil, bad man hated by newspapers. So what we're saying here is things are happening from the outside in. Largo, Florida, I've written about Largo a number of times. They run the whole city's 450 some odd desktops shared by over 800 employees on one Red Hat running server. One server. 450 clients. Big server. You know, works fine. Backup, smaller server next to it. Little Citrix server for the few Microsoft apps that they have to work with some of the surrounding counties. And all of those people who say that the office workers can't use this and that. You know, the first time I walked into that city hall, I walked up and there's a receptionist. And, you know, like a lot of people in Florida, she's not real young. At 53, I am exactly at the median age for our part of the world, God's waiting room, you know? So I asked this kind of, you know, ditzy looking, you know, 50s standard issue receptionist woman who's stapling stuff. The city hall, I said, how's that computer work? Because I saw, you know, that little gear in the lower left corner where the start button's supposed to be, you know. And I asked her, how's the computer work? She says, oh, it's really nice. Look at my new screensaver and my new background. She said, that's Cheryl's grandchildren. She got the award this week for the best background, so we're all using it in our department. Hey, if you have a city kind of computer system, I'm going to tell you, you have a problem. The police, some of the police and some of the fire guys want to put up nudie pinups on their computers. No, 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 can't do that. But wait, what if you had a central server and you could control that? You wouldn't have that problem, would you? Now, if you were a smart, real smart network admin, you'd have a contest to see who had the different desktop background and the best screensaver of the week. And you'd have a whole bunch of them that were all approved, and grandchildren would be a very big subject matter at parties. And they would bring in their photos, and they'd spread throughout departments, and they'd, you know, give out a prize for the weekly best one. So they could make it into a game. You can do this in Largo. But wait, the Largo IT system is not just about having cute backgrounds. It's the fact that they're running 850 people with this many sysadmins. That many, okay? And they don't work very hard. They're very lazy men. They work in the city because even though the pay is not great, they can go home or actually out to their boats and go fishing at 4 o'clock. They're big fishermen. They had nice boats, both of them, been on them. And their beepers didn't go off. Their beepers hardly ever go off. Their stuff just works. But wait, there's more. The city of Largo consistently wins awards for having the lowest cost per population and per total city expenditure of any municipality in Florida and now the Southeast United States. They're cheap. They're also now putting in their own concocted terminals in cop cars. They can't have thin clients in cop cars because they might lose a connection, like in a parking garage. Luckily in Florida, unlike you poor souls here, we don't have to worry about getting behind mountains because we don't have any.
You have lightning?
Oh yeah, we like lightning. Very dramatic skies, lovely. And alligators too. I was going to bring one with me just to liven things up here. But the airline, you know how they are. They're so silly nowadays. Anyway, Largo is quite the center of excellence for this sort of thing in our part of the world. And Eldon, being a smart guy, and having read some of my stories that Matt had showed him, went up to Largo and talked to them, and talked to Richard, who runs their IT department. He's a squat little old cracker. Another one. Yep, that works real good, don't it? Now the boys, they figured out what was wrong with all of computers and police cars and what's dumb about them, why they cost so much, and they fixed it. You know what the problem with police car computers is? Who can tell me? Nah. The biggest problem is that, and this is the problem of all laptops, is the keyboard is over the guts of the thing. So let us assume you are a police and you are in your car. Right, you have a cup of coffee, you're sitting there in a parking lot at idle or whatever, and you're doing it. You're going to spill a coffee sometime, and you can never get it comfortable, you know? Wait, we need to take the keyboard and detach it. So what if we were to buy a whole bunch of tablet computers, not because we want to use them as tablets, but because we could do that. Then we get a whole bunch of metal with lighted keys, we find, if we're assiduous buyers, keyboards, and then even that are waterproof and cover them with plastic even. And then if a keyboard fails, all you have to do is unplug it and plug in another one. The tablet can then be secured very well to the dashboard so it won't get stolen out of the car, which happens to laptops, even in police cars. And you can now, if you're the police at night, you put your cup of coffee in your cup holder, and you can squidgy around, and you put your keyboard where you want it. So the advantages for this are it's more comfortable for the police officer, it's less subject to damage, lasts longer, and it's cheaper. Other than these, there are no advantages. Then if you already had a Johnson 800 megahertz radio system, some of you know what that is, some of you don't, but basically it's 800 megahertz, data channel, and if you use that, what you could do is you'd have to run an actual desktop, but it wouldn't have to be much of a desktop in the cop cars, and you'd have to pull data, fingerprints and things, so you'd have to have some graphics capability. So you could pull your photos and whatnot, and you're wanted, and do your license card checks, and voila, they're doing this. $1,100 a car total, hardware and software cost for the computer, and they already had the Johnsons. How much do you think Honolulu is spending per car on computers? Bradenton, Florida, we're only 30 miles, if that, from Largo, we're spending $3,800 a car. I now and then say something to the mayor and the city council, and they look at me funny. But Largo's doing it. St. Petersburg's starting to. Other small and medium-sized towns are doing this. Eldon Segrest is moving rapidly toward Linux and open source with the fish farm. Other people are following in his footsteps. Meanwhile, on the internet, FreeCycle has millions of members. And hardly anybody here has heard of it because it's not in Technorati and all that. From the outside in, these things are growing all over the place. Little humble things, one installation at a time. I've been writing books. If I was more organized, I would have brought copies. I left some with Scott that he can use as giveaways or whatever. In 2004, November, came out Point and Click Linux. 300 pages, 45 minutes of not very well produced videos, but they were at least amusing, which is good. 2005 came out pointandclickopenoffice.org, 200 pages of text, an hour and a quarter of rather good videos. Okay, let's see here. We only have 2 points so far, so we can't do a real curve, so let's just look at a linear piece here, and we'd say the next one might have 100 pages of text and maybe 2.25 hours of video. Does that sound about right? How much text do we need? 50 pages? What's a page? Why should it be on paper? Why not just do it as the chapters, each an HTML file? And when you're reading that and you click on an illustration, a little flash video pops up and runs. How about that? You can have the best of both worlds. And you can get the latest help from the whatever, so let's say Firefox. Here are 3 of the best Firefox help forums on the internet. Whoa, they're clickable links, dudes and dudettes. Just click on it and you go right there. Try to do that in a paper book, fella. So we have here a new media forum, but it's not new, it's same old junk, and I'm calling it mixed media because I'm old enough that multimedia was like somebody showing a slide of some paisley pattern and a poet and some guy twittering on a flute. That was multimedia. Yes, I can see you're showing your age, all right. We know about you. But it's true. And of course, I think multimedia now is just anything that's video or audio that you put on the internet, right? Isn't that multimedia? Or are those vodcasts? Vodcasts are where you drink a lot of vodka before you make your podcast. We've been working on that internally on the Slashdot private secret authors channel. We've been working on things on podcasts and blogs and what to do with those. And this all works together. It does come back together into Linux. Because as we all know, there are blogs, right? And if you are from Appalachia or Ireland and you like to dance, you have clogs. And we have video blogs now, which are called vlogs, but I'm still not sure if the vodka maybe doesn't get in there anywhere. Although, if you're going to do a video blog, maybe vodka helps. Don't know. Let me see what else we have. S&M people have flogs. And these are actually happening in a dumb way. We're seeing all these things develop. Most of them are awful, aren't they? How many people have listened to a lot of podcasts? How many of them have you heard that were worth listening to? You can, right, you do 5. Yeah, I'm hearing 5, I see 2. Exactly. This is the problem with blogs. I estimate that there are 300 people in the world who can do a really good blog. I may be one of them. But wait, back before there was this internet thing, I wrote what used to be called a column in a newspaper, and I also wrote feature stories in the newspaper. So to me, it's the same old thing, different method of delivery. It's all about narrative. This will get back to Linux, really it will, and open source. The 2 oldest forms of human recreation are narrative and sex. Yeah, you don't need no tools. Narrative is just telling stories. Sex, if you don't know about it, come see me after class. And if you have a note from your parents, I will tell you about it. If you're female and real cute, you might, well, my wife is another matter. But those are our oldest forms of recreation. Here's a gentleman from Amazon. Amazon's basic business is distributing narratives. I try to write computer books as narratives with, and please don't anybody faint, a beginning, a middle, and an end that's a conclusion, just like a novel. Scary idea. We have no short story market anymore in this country, which is what I wanted to do when I was quite young, was write short stories. Because the television show has replaced the short story for all practical purposes. We do not have somebody writing, we don't have O. Henry, except we have people who are just as good, and they're working on The Daily Show now. And they're working on other sitcoms, but unfortunately, those have to go through major committee vettings and get screwed up before you can see them. Oh well. Gosh, we need new media. We need new ways to display this. Because here I am advancing these books, and here's that point-and-click Linux book, and it's still in your local borders, still in your Barnes & Noble, and I wrote that a year and a half ago, and it runs MEPIS Linux, which is advanced so far from that it's really sad that I really don't advise you to buy that book. Why isn't it updated? Because, says Prentice Hall, there are too many copies in the channel, and we'd have to take them all back. Because you see, booksellers are not retailers. You know that consignment store your wife or girlfriend takes her, dresses to, or maybe buys dresses from? That's really what Barnes & Noble is. It's not a retailer, it's a consignment shop. So the fact that they have something on the shelf doesn't mean they bought it. They can kick it back to the publisher, which diminishes the poor author's tiny pittance even further. So you see, we can't update a book for a minimum of 2 years. That's fun, isn't it? Let me see. I think we need to do something about that, don't you? I sure do. Come to think of it. What's that? John, I'm just too old. I could stop reading books, but other people want to read them, and if I write them, they give me money, and I like that. I like people who give me money. If you've bought anything from ThinkGeek, we thank you. Yes, my company owns ThinkGeek. Yeah. ThinkGeek. Yes. We will sell you T-shirts that say, there are only 10 kinds of people, those who understand binary and those who don't, and things like that. Ones that say, got root? You know, cool geek things, some of which are expensive electronics. In any case, from the outside in, from the edges in, this is where I see the vast majority of small business Linux and open source adoptions in small businesses. They're not happening big time. They're happening small time. Amazon is cool. That's nice to know, thank you. Google or whatever, Giggle, whatever it is, they got all those famous Linux servers. Oh, that's so sweet. Hey, everybody VA Linux laid off, went to work for Google. I know half the staff there. I'm not kidding. Really, they did. I know a lot of people at Google. And that's real nice. These big companies, you get lots of press. They're real big. But, you know, one Matt Millen at the fish farm, one desktop at a time, one application at a time, one server at a time, down at the little investment bank down in Venice, Florida, a town where, ready for this, the median age is 76. Yeah, it is. I have two friends who live down there. They're both in their 20s. They feel young. Yeah. One of them, they both race cars, by the way. Go over to, well, no, they go over to Sebring and Daytona and race, on tracks. We're talking about serious racing. Venice does have a police force. They have both cars out sometime at the same time. And they don't have much to do, but they're getting stuff now. In any case, there are these boys, and Craig works for a small investment bank, handles trust funds and whatnot for old people. I wonder why. And they have maybe 20 seats, 4 servers, because they got to deal with a lot of remote stuff and reps. And he too, he's an active test bed guy. He brings stuff in that I write about, because the way I test business hardware and software, I can't test it at home. I hand it to one of my friends who has a business, and they try it and see if it works. Now, obviously, their employers have to be cognizant of this. Eldon Segrest likes it. He says, you mean I get to try out new expensive blade servers for nothing? I said, yeah. He says, hell, I'll come in and work with Matt on that after school. Or after work, he'll say sometimes school. I've been a teacher a long time. I like that stuff. He likes to come down and play with the wires, too. He likes to plug stuff up. It's a private company. He owns it outright. So he can do that. The investment bank is also privately owned. So little companies, 50, 60 employees, 20. Eldon is not so little. He's just barely a small business. If he makes this one more acquisition, he'll be over 500 employees. Takes a lot of people to get those fish out. Thinking of which, have you figured out how to put an RFID chip in a fish yet? It's a little expensive. Here's another thing, and here's something that you need a friend who does open source type stuff in a base. Inventory control programs are simple, right? What if your inventory changes in size and value? In other words, see this goldfish? Wholesale value 4 cents. How about this goldfish? How much is it worth? Well, I don't know, about 400, maybe 40. I have goldfish that are this big myself, but I grew them from cheapies. People think they're koi. They're not. But obviously they do change. Is this an interesting inventory proposition? Is there any ERP software out there that will do this? People have taken whacks at it because it's true of all ranching and farming and operations that they do this. It's not been well supported. So some friends of Matt are working on this. This is an open source project funded by Eldon with a little help from your friends at Walmart, because they want to be able to keep that inventory in the store too. You know Walmart runs on Linux, right? Is anybody here aware of that? They run on Linux. If anybody ever asks you about Linux and Windows in the enterprise, let me just tell you this. It's absolutely true, and Bill Gates cannot deny it, but I'm just going to tell you the reality. Kmart runs on Windows. Walmart runs on Linux. Does anybody get the message here? Kmart is going bankrupt, slowly limping into oblivion with Sears together. Walmart is taking over the world. World domination through Linux. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. Just keep reminding people, the small, ambitious business person. Well, why are you saying I should move to Linux? Because Kmart runs on Windows, just like you do now, sir, but Walmart runs on Linux. Which would you rather be? Marketing.
Is that a well-known fact?
No. It's a pair of AS400s in Bentonville, run everything. Each Walmart store has in the back, they got a server and they got a backup, and that runs the store. Go look. If they let you. They will, if you know people. They run on Linux. It's an open source shop. They got a lot of stuff that's modified that's, they just never licensed it, don't release it, but they're working more and more with their suppliers on how to do these things and their supply chain. So they want to be able to talk to Eldon, and his stuff has to be able to talk to their 62 trillion partitions of Linux on those big 400s. They're in a very plain room in Bentonville too. If you've has anybody here ever been to Walmart headquarters? I have twice. They have green metal desks. They are not fancy. If you go to work at Walmart, you're not going to work in an executive suite with a great view. Their headquarters is low. And the furniture is cheap, and the carpet is the same carpet you buy you get everything at Walmart, okay? Except the computers. Oh, and I am going to say one thing. There's a total digression. Those under $500 balance laptops at Walmart.com, they suck. I know, I bought one for my wife. I don't care, Windows, Linux, it's a hardware problem. They suck. The fans are noisy. And the internal, the built-in wireless chip is like a fake onboard USB device that doesn't work very well. So I just thought I'd let you know. They're cheap because they're lousy. And sometimes just because something runs Linux doesn't make it good. In this case, no matter what, and we've tried Windows on them too, the fans are really loud. I'm sorry, high-pitched whine. If you don't have very good high hearing, that might not bother you, but I do. So that isn't working. Walmart, Linux, little companies. Here's another truism here that I'm just going to tell you as an old cab driver, coming from a long line of what I call Jewish ghetto hawkers, people who owned not big businesses, but like small landlords, the kind of people that had 8 units. My grandfather on one side had 4 pawn shops. People like that. Businesses where we always thought, we didn't know what burn rate was, but we always thought the way you made a profit was to take in more than you spent every month. It's a dumb idea. No investors, You have your business. You got a fixed cost. You have cost of goods. You sell the goods for enough more than they cost you to cover your overhead and put some money in your pocket. If you fail at this, first you stop having money to put in your pocket. And when you do that, your wife gets really angry. And then she leaves you. And then you get depressed and you can't make the rent and you're out of business. So you have to make money every month, take in more than you spend. And it's a truism here is that big business deals with big business. Small business deals with small business. If Aaron was in here, he would be hearing this, and he would be understanding why I'm telling him Novell's lack of solicitation of small businesses doesn't matter. The small business does not go to Novell. They go to the guy, the consultant, the channel, the consultant. They met at the Chamber of Commerce, or through one of those networking things, or that Matt's father has a neighbor and friend who knows Eldon who has the fish farm. How do we quantify that relationship, which leads to a sale of a maintenance contract for open exchange? How do we quantify that in the Forrester IDC Gartner business analyst world? How do we do that? How do we measure it?
Just estimate it.
And guess. And you're lying. You're guessing your estimate is a lie. It's happening. You don't know how it's happening. It's like the chess machine with the midget, except it's now Amazon online. I always liked that. I knew about the chess playing Turk. I loved that. So now that comes along, and we have no idea. I wasn't kidding. I had this vision, while listening to that, sitting over here, of putting out how you could make a porn movie as a series of 30-second collages. It would be terrible, but would it be art or would it be porn? It doesn't have to be a porn movie. It could be anything. There's just so many weird things you could make that are of no value. But are they? You don't know whether they have value until you create them. But you have to realize I'm crazy. I'm thinking of putting up another Slashdot poll soon. And the question will be, do you have an opinion? Yes, no. And maybe Cowboy Neil, maybe not. But is that a poll? There's only one answer. Of course it's a recursive poll. So where would you put it but on Slashdot? See, excuse me, sir, do you have an opinion? Yes or no?
Yes.
I'm thinking about that as a Slashdot poll.
Do you have an opinion? Yes or no? How many people will get that? How many will get that wrong?
What is right? The question is, I mean, you know, the discussion will be, it won't go on very far. I mean, you know,
You participate in Slashdot polls.
that's a different question. That's like, we already have that. I never read Slashdot anymore. I only read Dig. Hello? I never read Slashdot anymore. I never post on Slashdot. So we already have that. It's just we're burlesquing now. What I was saying, Aaron, is that big companies deal with big companies, and little companies deal with little companies. And I was telling folks how Matt Moen hooked up with the fish farm, which now runs Open Exchange. How as of last week, Microsoft Exchange was banished, and nobody runs Outlook anymore. They're all on Firefox and Thunderbird. And Eldon Segrest, by the way, enjoys his newfound security from viruses born by those two pieces of software in his life, because he worries about that. So this gives him more time to go play with his hunting dogs. Eldon likes his hunting dogs. And this is happening all over. And yes, Aaron and I were talking out in the hall about the different stepped layers of tech support. Somebody here in this room Aaron, you might do this business. Joe Volodorsky and I thought about it for Amnet Computer as office in a box. Theorem. Every office in the United States has somebody who's smart enough to plug in a computer if the cables are color-coded to start it up. I'd say it's a fair bet that every single business in this country has somebody who can do that, or at least has a nephew who can do that. Right? The ability to plug in a keyboard and a mouse and a network cable and a monitor and a power cord is close enough to being universal that it's like driving. There's some people who don't, but most everyone can. Okay, so what if we had a small client server that you bought in a box? The redundant server, and then of course the thin clients were cheap, and if they were close, you could just use userful and skip the clients completely. Office in a box. Get it, set it up, knock yourself out. You could even do wireless if you're not concerned about security and you don't want to run wires. This can be remotely administered by somebody smart, so you don't have to have anybody there. You never do any service calls because you can pretty much tell if you have. You don't have to be real smart to follow somebody's directions by phone. Say, does the light on the front of the monitor come on? You can isolate it down pretty easily to whether it's a monitor or one of your thin clients or your one server or your backup server or whatever that's out of action, or your printer or a cable. This is not hard to do. We'll step through diagnostic stuff. And hopefully the people at the helpline should be able to speak in the customer's native language with an appropriate accent. And don't offshore, if you're in India, in one of the Hindi-speaking parts, I do not advise you to outsource your tech support to Vietnam or to Iowa. Or was it the other way around? I don't know. But this saves virtually all service calls because you can send them one. And they can plug it in themselves. You can have them a spare in the closet. It's called Office in a Box. Knock yourself out, Aaron. Sell a bunch of them. You can do that with Linux, except for the accounting package. Actually, there are accounting packages, ACPAC and such. What is? Right. There's about 8 or 9 of them. Well, there you go. I said, so. And I don't want to talk about that because I've had many beers in my life with Jeremy White and the Intuit saga. And, Code Weavers and Intuit saga. It's long, it's dumb, it's repetitive. And, my wife says the soap opera Passions is much better. In any case, what we're really seeing here is things from the outside edge moving in. Flickr and LinkedIn and Boodle get all of the splash and all that. Oh boy, let's all go to Web 2.0 and let's all invest lots of mega capital and this and that. And whoa, we're all going to get to be trillionaires and stuff like that. And if we all buy Ford Explorers and drive across Texas, and we can think, I really want to own a lesbian book collective in St. Paul, Minnesota, so I'm going to start a company called Amazon. He knows, true story. There was an Amazon online long before the one you know about in Washington State, and it was a lesbian book co-op in St. Paul, Minnesota, which later, after it got enough money to build a really nice new building, changed their name. Got to watch what you name things nowadays. Somebody has that name, and in the old days, if it was just somebody within your locality or state, you were okay. If somebody there wasn't using it, you were cool. You could have Joe's Garage in Des Plaines, Illinois, and Joe's Garage in Fort Worth. Okay, but now you can't both have joesgarage.com. You have to have joesgaragefortworth.com. It's part of the life, folks. It is the World Wide Web, and it covers the whole world. And around that world, right now, somewhere, I do not know in what country, there is a small business who is not having a 3-week problem putting in Linux, but is doing like we did in Florida, where, as you know, we're all addled by hurricanes and kind of stupid and, all that, right? We're weird and stupid. Look at how we dress. The only thing I'm missing, see, if I was from Miami, I'd have black socks to complete the outfit. I'm over 50, I'm a member of the AARP, and I'm Jewish, so I should wear black socks. And, of course, the mismatch, which is on purpose. We put in the Liberty City Learning Center there, a complete Linux-based lab, 28 workstations, just like HOSEF stuff. No big deal. We did it in one day, most of which was taken up by the physical wiring. The server was prepped in 2.5 hours. The biggest problem we had with the wiring was actually the fact that we had people who spoke 3 different languages who had trouble communicating. We had 2 French speakers, 2 Spanish speakers, and 2 guys from Tennessee who had that accent. But everybody got along and communicated, and beer helps. Beer helped, and that whole lab was put together in just about 8 hours, not 3 weeks. And it ran a whole server and all that, and it would be easier to do today. I could do it with Novell, with OpenSUSE or CloseSUSE. I could do it with Mepis. I could do it with Fedora. I could do it with any major Linux distro. And I'm a writer, not a techie. I'll bet the techie people here could do it lots faster. Go ahead. Do it. One little company at a time without worrying about the big companies. You'll be fine.